The Elephone G4 is a low-budget smartphone with a 720p display and quad-core processor. It's available in a variety of colors, including black, white, yellow, pink, blue, and green. This is my full review of the Elephone G4. When I first picked up the G4, I was surprised at how solid it felt in the hand. I expected it to feel a lot like the THL T6s, which was comfortable to hold, but didn't have the same premium build quality as a $300 or even $200 phone. The Elephone, however, feels both well-built and had no trouble taking a bit of wear and tear. I actually accidentally dropped the device as I was taking it out of my pocket during the review period. It landed on a hardwood floor, yet did not suffer any damage. This was reassuring to me, as the build quality is much better than I'd anticipated. The back cover does resist scratches very well, but it does easily collect fingerprints. Unfortunately, the fingerprints can be difficult to get out, sometimes requiring a damp cloth to fully remove them. The Elephone logo is displayed on the rear cover, and a few regulatory logos appear near the bottom. The power button is on the right side, while the volume rocker is on the left. They are both within reach, and have nice tactile feedback. The sides of the phone feel very nice, although the corners do dig into my hands when holding the phone with one hand. It's kind of nitpicky, but it's enough to make me change how I hold the phone. It does not have a notification LED, which is something that I miss from almost every other phone that I have tested. The 1.3 megapixel front-facing camera is on the top left, and the 3 capacitive buttons are near the bottom. The 3 capacitive buttons match the OnePlus One: menu, home, and back. These don't illuminate, unfortunately, but you should have no trouble finding the buttons after using the phone for a while. Speaking of the OnePlus One, it's very obvious where the design for this phone was taken. Although a bit smaller, the Elephone G4 looks very similar to the One. The back cover is removable, and the rear camera is positioned differently, but the shape and overall design of the Elephone matches the OnePlus One design. This is slightly disappointing, but the audience for this phone is very different from the audience for the OnePlus One. The phone is 8.3mm thick and weighs 158 grams, which is about average for this size. Callers said the call quality from the Elephone was about average, however, the earpiece seems to be a bit muffled. I often had difficulty understanding what callers were saying, and I ended up switching phones in the middle of a long phone call. It is dual SIM with one micro SIM slot and one standard SIM slot. I did get HSPA Plus speeds after inserting my AT&T US SIM.
Press 1 to add money to your account. Press 2 to check your account balance. Press 3 for account information. Press 4 for promotion information. Press 9 for customer service. To repeat these menu options, press the star key. Or to end this call, please hang up.
The 5-inch 720p display is more than reasonable at this price point. Few phones under $130 offer anything more than WVGA, but the G4 is an exception. The display does have some minor backlight bleeding issues, but otherwise looks good. The colors do seem warm and sometimes oversaturated, and I wish the brightness could be adjusted lower. The viewing angles are good, but not excellent. The touchscreen does feel more resistive than capacitive in terms of material, but it is capacitive and supports up to 5-point multi-touch. Whatever material they used on the display feels very cheap and causes the display to become a fingerprint magnet. I found myself having to constantly wipe the display, sometimes even with a damp cloth. The speaker sounds fairly loud and the quality is just okay. There's some distortion, even at lower volumes, although it will suit the occasional YouTube viewer. Unless you watch a lot of videos or listen to music through your phone speaker, this isn't of a major concern. The 8-megapixel rear camera is pretty bad. It does have a slightly higher megapixel count than many other smartphones at the same price range, but that doesn't fix the quality issues. Images are blurry, noisy, and look washed out. It also has some exposure issues where it will under or overexpose. You have to be really careful when choosing an object to focus on, as it can ruin the whole picture. The viewfinder is also pretty slow to update. It does record up to 720p video, but again, this is a budget device and the camera was obviously not something of focus. On a positive note, the Elephone G4 ships with Android 4.4.2 KitKat. The whole ROM is nearly stock, which is a welcome change from the other phones that I've been recently testing. It does arrive pre-rooted and supports several gestures when the phone is locked. You can double tap to wake, swipe up to unlock, and draw letters to launch apps. Elephone did replace many of the icons with their own, which look to have been inspired by iOS. I installed Nova Launcher and changed the launcher icons to stock. It does include all of the stock Google apps pre-installed, including the Google Play Store. The only very minor complaint I have about the software is that the app shortcuts added to the launcher are removed when restarting the phone. This only happens to apps that are on the microSD card, but it appears to be an issue with the launcher rather than the actual software. It's a minor issue, but can be easily resolved with a free third-party launcher. I have some doubts that the G4 will ever see Lollipop, but MediaTek's recent strategy looks promising. Many Chinese smartphones were stuck on Android Jelly Bean for the longest time, mainly because MediaTek did not release the proper drivers for KitKat. When MediaTek did release the drivers, many of the OEMs had moved on to other phones or refused to create an update. I'm a little more confident that MediaTek will release Lollipop drivers for the CPU, but I don't think Elephone will release an update. If you're going to buy this phone, assume that it will be stuck on KitKat forever. Powered by the MediaTek MTK6582 quad-core 1.3 GHz processor with a Mali 400 GPU, performance seemed good for a budget device. An AnTuTu test reveals a score of 17,536, which is below average but still very respectable considering the price. It also has 1 GB of RAM, which should be enough for basic multitasking. The phone is powerful enough to handle basic games, but can struggle just a bit with frame rate in graphic-intensive games. With just 4 GB of internal storage, you'll be in a pinch to find room for large apps and files. Luckily, the phone does have a microSD card slot, which supports an additional 64 GB. Almost all of my apps could be moved to the microSD card to preserve internal free space. Unless you're going to use this phone for only a phone, you're going to want to consider picking up one of these cards. GPS on the G4 did take a minute to lock, but once it locked, it had no issues tracking my location. GPS navigation also worked well, but again, took a minute to lock. With a 2050 mAh removable battery, the G4 often struggles to make it through a single day of light use. I often found it only lasting until about 4 p.m. with light to moderate use, which translated to roughly 2 hours of screen on time. I'm slightly disappointed with the battery life on this phone, but again, it's a $100 phone. If you purchase the Elephone G4 from Panduel, you will receive a quick guide from Elephone, a Panduel Quick Start Guide, a screen protector, a gel case, a micro USB cable, and an AC adapter. So I guess that brings us to my conclusion. It's a good choice for $100, but you should be aware of its shortcomings. Elephone didn't sacrifice the core experience for the price. They included a 5-inch 720p display, a quad-core processor, and a great build quality. Unfortunately, there's only so much an OEM can do with $100. Is it better than the THL T6s? Yeah, the screen and the build quality are just so much better. You don't want to buy this phone if you're going to make a lot of phone calls or take a lot of pictures, but it's still a good option, and it's still better than the THL T6s. If you are interested in the Elephone G4, please visit the links in the description to view it on Panduel. Thank you for watching, and please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to see more phone unboxings and reviews.